Good evening. Welcome to the Colvin Institute webinar series. I'm Maria Day Marshall, Director of the Colvin Institute of Real Estate Development at the University of Maryland. Tonight, we will be discussing leadership in engineering equitable participation, or LEEP, L-E-E-P. The LEEP Initiative is a nonprofit whose focus is equity, community-oriented, and socially responsible development. It is a certification process modeled after LEED, L-E-E-D, the Environmental Sustainability Framework for Healthy, Efficient Carbon and Cost-Saving Green Buildings. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Anna McPhail, Executive Director of LEEP, and Alan Doanes, Managing Partner, Strategic Urban Development Alliance, LLC. Anna and Alan will present, and then afterwards we will take questions. If you would like to ask a question, please put your question in the Q&A box or the chat box. So at this time, I will turn the floor over to Anna and to Alan so that they can talk about LEEP.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm the Executive Director, as Maria just noted, of the LEEP Initiative. And we're, myself and our board and board chair and founder, Alan Doanes, we're going to split the time today. So I will go first on kind of the nuts and bolts of what the LEEP Initiative is, as well as a little bit about the theoretical background. And then Alan will swoop in and give a really great presentation regarding the implementation. It's done on the ground, pitfalls and lessons learned along the way. So with that, I will share my screen. And there we go. So the LEEP Initiative, as was just noted, stand for Leadership in Engineering Equitable Participation. And our presentation really today is going to focus on how to make that equitable participation real within the real estate industry so that we can have better and more equitable outcomes for a broader array of stakeholders. So the key issue that we're trying to address essentially looks at how the current and traditional real estate industry has a lot of economic benefits, but they are for a limited and select few. It excludes a lot of local community members and stakeholders who are impacted by the built environment development, but they lack the social and economic gains that come from that development. Therefore, they have a limited social mobility, as well as community growth is inhibited simply because they were not at the table in order to have a say in how those benefits were more easily distributed. So there's two key questions that we want to answer. The first is whether or not real estate stakeholders, both those professionally within the industry, developers, investors, real estate practitioners, as well as those who aren't necessarily directly paid professionals in the industry, but analyze them, such as researchers, community members, and organization policymakers, et cetera. How do all of these stakeholders come together and say, hey, we would like a list of standardized best practices in order to make sure that we have more equitable participation and more equitable outcomes for those stakeholders? And then a second key question is, can we develop a certification system to actually evaluate and measure what equity means in terms of social and economic benefits within a real estate project? So in order to answer those questions, we did a few things. We did about a year's worth of direct research and conducted interviews with real estate development professionals, researchers, and other stakeholders, including community members and organizations, so that we can hear what some of the problems were, what were some of the strategies that have been tried, which ones went well, which ones didn't, the scope and breadth of those strategies and solutions, as well as looking at both secondary sources and white papers to actually get a better sense and feel for what's missing within the industry. So as we started to put together the team for the LEEP initiative, which this team is still evolving and growing, plenty of opportunity there as well, which I'll get into later. But as we start to look at the research results that we have, we knew we needed a few pilot projects, two of which I'm sure our chair, Alan Doanes, will speak to, both the Eastline Project and Mandela Station. But we wanted to evaluate what were the pros, what were going really great, as well as what were some of the pitfalls, where were the hurdles and barriers to entry that were really preventing to have a more equitable, participatory environment for each of these projects. Our key contributors, our initial key contributors are listed on the left-hand side of the screen, and we've also spoken to numerous organizations, some that focus on a niche part of the process, others who focus more expansively on research, academia, or on policy. But culminating all of this together, we decided that the answer is, yeah, we can actually create a certification system that can help to measure social and economic inequality, as well as the outcomes specific to the real estate industry. And that is how the LEEP initiative was essentially born. And that is the framework we're trying to use, looking at how all the different pieces of development can actually impact and influence how economic and community-based efforts are used and promoted so that they can actually respond to the local needs of that community in which the built environment is being proposed. The objective is to make sure that we have more economic and socially equitable opportunities for all stakeholders, not just real estate professionals and not just community members, but to really work collaboratively and collectively to make something that's useful for everyone. And we're modeling this off of LEED, which is one of the most well-known environmental sustainability standards. There's a few others, Green Globes, Built Green is another. All of these certification systems look at how the environmental sustainability and energy efficiency of a particular project can be measured and evaluated and followed through on from an environmental and climate perspective. We want to create something similar, except we are primarily focusing on the social and economic impacts of a project, as opposed to only looking at the environmental sustainability component of a project. And with that, we're creating two different programs. The first, as I mentioned, will look at industry best practices for both already existing best practices, which Alan will definitely speak to of what's already being done, as well as some of the ones that we would like to see moving forward as we build out this certification. And the second piece is really turning those best practices into a usable, standardized, and rating system through a certification process similar to LEED or Green Globes. And that piece will actually provide the measurements and the valuation tools and systems so that developers can actually put together a project that meets LEED and LEEP certifications. So there's a few key unique pieces of the LEEP certification that we're proposing. And the first, I think, is really important to point out, and that's inclusivity. A lot of initiatives exist throughout the nation, quite frankly, throughout the world, that actually address really niche, key stakeholder involvement and community engagement opportunities. But a lot of those initiatives are really unique and hone in specifically on one project or one county or one city, which we have a lot of information to learn from those. It's not our objective to recreate the wheel, but to really make the wheel better and to broaden it into something more comprehensive. And the first way to do that is through inclusivity. So we're looking from the very beginning of a project, the pre-conception phase, all the way through the design, through the building, through the construction, through procurement, all the way through occupancy. That entire process will have inclusivity of all stakeholders involved, which is unique compared to anything else on the market right now. The second piece is a cost-effective solution. We know that collaboration can seem like it's time-consuming, but collaboration done well and done early can actually save development projects a lot of money in the long run, especially when they do get to the entitlement phase and permitting phase, where it can risk having communities backlash against a project and can lead to eventually costly and ineffective discourse and potentially litigation. So finding cost-effective solutions that can work for everyone is also something that's imperative to us in our survival. And then third, but certainly not least, is continued engagement. Yes, it's wonderful to hear at the beginning of a project or even throughout the development of a project how the community and stakeholders will be engaged, but we want to make sure that engagement continues through occupancy as well of that project, whether it's commercial or residential. We want to make sure that those opportunities for inclusive growth and the financial benefits thereof are available to all the stakeholders. So what is this framework? What are the things that we're really trying to promote? So as we were doing our research, as I mentioned earlier, we found a lot of silos where you might mention one or maybe two of the things that you see on your screen right now. So as we put together our framework, we wanted to have something that was comprehensive and that allowed for true social and economic opportunities to be realized within a project at scale. So we have 6 pillars, and those 6 pillars are in front of you, and I'll briefly describe each of them. The first is small and local business utilization. A lot of projects will go into neighborhoods that are already existing. And so making sure that the small businesses that are already there have the supports necessary to continue on and to grow is imperative. Providing those wraparound services will be necessary to make sure the small businesses and local businesses can stay in business and continue to grow. Next, we have employment and workforce development. So, of course, with any new development, there might be a case and need to actually have new skilled or unskilled labor come into an area, but it shouldn't come at the cost of displacement and gentrification of the local population. So making sure that the workforce and talent and training dollars that are necessary for making sure you have a skilled workforce are used within the local community first, making sure that the local community is invested in whatever field or sector that is coming in, making sure there's apprenticeships and internships and other opportunities for folks to grow in their professional careers, and also building up to that long-term pipeline that those small businesses are going to need in order to sustain growth. Combining the prior two, we lead to ownership opportunities and wealth. We want to make sure that the owners and investors within a community are receiving the benefits, and the best way to create that ownership is having skin in the game. Whether the local community is able to outright participate in more traditional investment models and providing capital for a project, that would be great. But providing additional ways for them to get involved and to gain ownership and create intergenerational wealth is going to be important for sustained community growth. That also includes making sure there's enough educational resources to better manage, grow, and sell or transfer those small businesses that we supported earlier. Next is housing for all, and we really do mean all and everyone. A lot of folks on this call might already assume that low-income housing is included. Market rate housing is also included, and everything else in between. We want to have a diverse economic background for our community to allow us to learn and grow together. We don't want to isolate or only allow one group to have the predominance of an area. So making sure there's enough housing and services to support that housing for everyone, low income, market rate, or everything in between, is going to be necessary. Health and wellness is another one of our pillars, and health and wellness has been investigated and is definitely coming to the forefront from the built environment, particularly with Fitwell and other certification systems. We are talking more expansive and not just looking at the building health and the occupant health of those within the buildings, but looking broader from a community standpoint. What is that community need in order to feel and be healthy and well? Do they need mental health services? Do they need physical health services, primary care physicians, wellness services such as yoga or other meditative services? It's really going to depend on the population. If there's an aging population in the community, a very young population in the community, a migrant population, or English as a second language population, all of the different types of things and support services that might be necessary for health and wellness of a community are going to be broader than what any one individual building can do. So looking at this from a community standpoint is what we are striving to achieve with this pillar. And last and certainly not least, we have the environmental sustainability pillar, and that one will pull heavily off of the tried and true already existing environmental sustainability certification systems such as LEED or Built Green or Green Globes, where we're looking at how renewable energy, water recycling, water conservation, energy conservation, or any of the other ways in which we can make a built environment more environmentally friendly and sustainable will be evaluated as well. So those are our 6 pillars that we are hoping to address with each one of our projects. So what are we doing next? We've already built up the basis of our framework, and we want to make sure that we continue to grow. So there's a few different things where we're currently seeking out some additional services, volunteers, and staff as well. So over the next 24 months, we're aiming to really further develop the LEEP certification system version 1.0 and get our standards of best practices up and running and ready, which will require multiple iterations and a lot of different stakeholders' input into our system, so that way we can have a really diverse and broad understanding of the various ways the built environment impacts a local community. A part of that will also be to convene all of our stakeholders, yes, in the development of the standards of best practice, but identifying where those stakeholders are coming from. The real estate development industry is one, investors are another, but also our community at large and those representing the community, including community organizations. Academia is going to be another key ingredient, particularly on the research and analytics side, to make sure that we're looking at the correct curriculums if they don't already exist, as well as providing more insight on how we can narrow down some of the options that we want to put into the certification system so we can have a broader impact, as well as the development industry and trade groups that are already existing. Some of those can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. We're also dealing with a few different nonprofits and other organizations who either help on the research or policy side of things, as well as looking at volunteers and other consultants and support services to help us get our vision and mission up and running. And with that, we need your support. One of the things that is imperative to any emerging nonprofit is making sure we have enough volunteers and staffing to move the mission forward, particularly as we have a very broad base in which we're trying to reach, making sure that we have voices that are being heard, as well as developing a framework that is repeatable and scalable is going to be key. So volunteers and staffing is going to be imperative to that. We also have leadership opportunities, particularly in our steering and advisory committees, as we're developing our standards of best practices. And last and certainly not least, as with anything, financial contributions are absolutely necessary to get us off the ground. All of the great ideas in the world are going to require funding and financing. And so we're also looking for whether any individual or community or business related funding opportunities as well that are aligned with our mission. And with that, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to pause for a second and exit out of my screen and open up Alan's presentation. Do we have any questions on the Q&A? I don't see any, so I just want to double check to see if there were any. I don't see any. So Alan, I'm going to go ahead and open up your presentation, or did you want to open up yours on your end first?
I think that if you can open up and just flip a couple of the slides, and then I'll jump over to mine. And
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and
Some of
get that.
those.
All right, so absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and get yours up and running and reshare.
Great.
All right, Alan, there you go.
Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Again, my name is Alan Doanes. Thank you, Anna, for that great lead in. And I'm really grateful, as always, to you for helping to frame the objectives of LEEP so brilliantly. And so I'm really honored to be here speaking to everyone today about our programs. By way of background, I'm the managing partner of Strategic Urban Development Alliance, and we're a developer based in Oakland, California. I think the best way to describe what we do is we're a company that specializes in public-private partnerships. And in real estate development, oftentimes what that means is providing facilities or that public agencies need, helping them meet some of their more challenging facility needs or development objectives for the different uses they have. Or sometimes it means acquiring public land that has been surplus, and for whatever reason, a public entity is disposing of the land, and we will oftentimes acquire the rights to develop those properties, and will oftentimes assemble a site that starts and is anchored by that public land, and we'll come up with a development strategy and a plan and go forward and implement it. So that's what Strategic Urban Development Alliance does. Believe it or not, number one, you guys have to forgive me in advance. I'm kind of corny, and some people think I'm chronically corny, so I sometimes interject humor, but it is not to mean that what I'm talking about is not very serious. But as long as I've been a developer, I've been an African-American developer. And that's kind of important because not only do I sometimes, feel the pressure of being an example for my community, but there's also a lot of expectation. But there's also a lot of deep desire to make sure that as I go about doing whatever business I'm in, and especially real estate, to do it in a manner that helps to uplift our community as a whole, helps to uplift other developers of color and set a good precedent and example, and in doing so, provide opportunities to our community. So I realized very early on that to achieve all of that is something that you have to be very, very steadfastly committed to as you encounter all the challenges of developing and encounter all the headwinds and get bucked around. You have to have an intentionality that you stick to and that presides and persists through all of the other distractions and challenges that we face. So the engineering equity just made me, engineering equity just came from the sense that you have to really be intentional from the earliest stages of the project. Sometimes I like to say during the DNA lining up of the project, you have to really start to code in to your plan and to your designs, as well as into your strategic implementation plans, this objective of being inclusive and being equitable, and making sure that people that, like in Oakland, there are many populations of people that have not had the opportunity to participate in all the goodness of real estate and real estate development. Real estate development and real estate in general is the largest asset class that we have in this country. You know, it's some folks have said over $800 trillion worth of assets. And it's the greatest facilitator of self-sufficiency, wealth creation, the ability to achieve intergenerational wealth transfer, and the ability to participate in that is something that really is essential to creating and fostering all the benefits of addressing inequality. So as Anna mentioned, this slide goes to the fact that we start out, before we start putting any pen to paper on a particular job site, we start out with that intensive community engagement. And we have a number of meetings for each project, and some of the meetings involve inviting large groups of people in for big planning sessions. Some of the meetings involve, you know, small groups. We have groups that meet on a monthly basis for projects. And sometimes we do special big events where we take in a lot of feedback and input, and we make sure that we come back. Anna, you can go to the next slide. Once we've taken in that feedback and input in all these different forums, we then spend a few months coming back and telling people what we heard and taking additional feedback. And once we're sure we've gotten really the pulse of the community, that's when we start designing. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I found is that the community is really, even though they're feared by developers sometimes, that they're going to come up with impractical demands and things, sometimes you find some of your best ideas come out of these meetings. And oftentimes we have a community that really comes and concludes a development profile and plan that's close to what we had started out with the intent of achieving, you know, from the beginning. And so we end up going through the design, and we can, from that point on, attest with a lot of credibility and integrity that the projects that we're putting forward represent something that has the benefit of that community engagement. And that helps us in many ways. It helps us as we go before the Planning Commission to have our designs reviewed. It helps us as we go before the City Council to have them finalize the approval of awarding us the land and turning the land negotiating agreements into purchase and sell agreements. And it just helps us bring visibility to our project that we find beneficial. One of the themes that I want to talk about tonight is this whole ability to achieve differentiation. You know, when you're developing real estate and you're developing speculative real estate, or you're going to develop a project competitively, you want to be grabbing onto all the different ways to differentiate your project from the next one. And also grabbing onto every way you can to make your project more cost effective. So some of those themes I'd like to talk about, how we do that while still honoring this intense commitment to equity and inclusion. If we, you know, a lot of people think that there's a cost to equity and that, you know, you have to be willing to accept reduced returns. And that's not true. In fact, I think the opposite is the truth. And as we start to curate and refine better community engagement, we're going to find ways to very, very carefully demonstrate that that actually achieves better financial outcomes. So maybe we can move down to the next slide. So that early community engagement, I talked about that. Go on to the next slide. We make sure that as part of that next step of the project, we from the beginning start to partner with training and education institutions to do everything to help make sure that we have that participation before design, during construction, after construction, in who manages the property. And once that property is turned over to the people that are going to live there and work there, that there's that level of participation in the ways that Anna described, for careers, small business participation, ownership, and wealth, creation, wealth, intergenerational wealth transfer. All of that takes education in every aspect of it. And whether you're talking about, working with higher education to make sure that you allow people to have the ability to participate in the design and the planning. If you're talking about during construction, facilitating the accessibility of communities within the project area to training programs that will allow them to be part of the construction workforce. Or if you're talking about the small businesses that are going to be providing services through all of these different stages of the project. When you're talking about making sure that they have the training resources that allow them to grow their businesses. All of these are things that we, through our real estate development, have active initiatives to foster making sure that we provide those training opportunities. And also, when we talk about wealth creation and wealth transfer, that involves providing training about wealth and investments of your legacy wealth, and estate planning, and financial management, and planning your wealth. So that's what we do with training. We will engage with community colleges as well as higher learning. I'll touch on a few of those more as we go forward. Okay, Anna, next one.
Quick chime in for a second, Alan. We have
Sure.
one quick question from Carrie that I think you can definitely speak to. The question is similar to LEED certification. Do we have a rating system based on points, and how would that work? The short answer is yes, but I think Alan will definitely speak to this anecdotally, as well as what this looks like on his projects as well. So I just wanted to put that question out there.
And that is one of the places, a great question, and I'll just address it now. We want to have a program that helps to provide not only a certification, a rating based on points that people get, but also a program that has this compendium and collection of best practices. And it's, that ability to offer the different people involved in these built practices, tools, and then that will allow them to achieve equity, a scorecard that allows them to basically keep track of how they've done it, and then the ability from there to communicate what their objectives are, and the social responsibility that is basically built into the projects that they end up building. So another important thing for all of these initiatives is basically going out early on and tapping into different ways to provide funding source to fund some of these initiatives, as well as the projects themselves. We want to make sure that we offer people that are going about equitable practices access to resources like tax credits, like opportunity zone, funding sources, all of the different grants and things that are available to help foster more equity and inclusion. And we just want to make sure that we offer developers and users of our LEEP initiative the ability to understand how they can fund some of the initiatives. Go on, Anna. To the next one. And then finally, what we want to make sure that we do is transactional structuring. We make sure that every stage of the transaction, we're putting things in place that allow these objectives to be met. You know, sometimes we'll ask the general contractors to engage in joint ventures with emerging contractors, mentor protege programs. We make sure that we incentivize all of the different stakeholders, suppliers, vendors, to make sure that they're equitable, provide them with tools as well. And again, doing every part of the development in a manner that really fosters that going forward and just making it second nature. Some of these things we're talking about, by the way, we want to make as, as routine as ADA compliance. We want to make it as routine as being seismically sound in your design. Nobody anymore has to ask you to do this. These are things you build into your project. And there were times where all of these things were resisted. I remember when we, after a few earthquakes, were trying to upgrade our seismic standards in California, a lot of people in the development community feeling that it was going to go too far and fearing that, we weren't going to be able to afford to build anything. And now nobody would want to live in a building that wasn't built to a certain seismic standard. And what we came up with was something that has now become routine. And we want social equity to be as routine as some of those standards, because if you don't make the investment up front, you'll suffer the costs and the consequences down the road. Maybe we can go on, Anna. And my favorite, technology deployment. When we develop a project, we deploy a lot of technology. Technology in how you design a building, technology that operates the building, technology that basically it involves the handling of information that the building generates. And that technology and the growth and the evolving of that technology is something that provides career and small business opportunities to people. And we want to make sure that those opportunities are made available to the general public, and especially those populations that have been utilized and underinvested in. And I'll come back a little bit on some of those themes as well. Anna, I think that is about it. I'm going to go and show a few of my slides real quickly. Where are we on time right now? While I pull up my...
We're doing great on time, about another 12 to 13 minutes.
All right. Let's see. I'm not sure if my slides came up here.
We can see all of the slides.
You can see all of the slides. Great. All right. I'll just go to the slideshow then from the beginning. So right now, my company is in a leadership role on 3 projects that I'll talk about today. One project, all of these projects are located on our rapid transit system known as BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit District. And these projects are very centrally located, and they're pretty much in the heart of our system. So they're all transit-oriented development. Collectively, these projects represent about 14 million square feet of potential development that's coming up. Two of our projects are fully entitled. The Mandela Station, which is about 1.4 million square feet, and the East Line, which is about 2.1 million square feet. The project that we recently were awarded the exclusive negotiating agreement on, the Coliseum, is about 12 million square feet, and we're just starting out with our pre-development activities there. Mandela Station is, again, the last station as you're leaving Oakland to head to San Francisco, and it's the first station you arrive at as you're entering Oakland from San Francisco. The San Francisco Financial District, which is arguably one of the strongest real estate markets in the world, is only a 7-minute BART ride from this station. Mandela Station is in West Oakland. It's been tremendously underinvested in an underserved community, but it's going through rapid gentrification. But it also, unfortunately, is experiencing rapid displacement. Our project, again, here involves a 520 unit market rate residential tower and a 240 unit affordable project, of which 1/3 of the units will be affordable to extremely low income families and populations. Our project also includes a 300,000 square foot project that will be a combination of office and life science R&D space. So Mandela Station is one of the 3 projects that I mentioned. These projects are big enough in scale to have a significant impact on some of the issues that are impacting Oakland and our Bay Area in general. And I'm very excited and honored to be able to use these projects as test pilot projects for LEEP. The other project is called the East Line. It's a project in downtown Oakland. This is a major, primarily office development that's going to be built, again, on a parcel that we assembled that included about a 1.4 acre city site. And then we bought all the surrounding properties, and we now have the entire super block. And this is a project, you know, for those of you in the development world or aspiring to be, you know, it's not always excitement and exhilaration. It's always a roller coaster ride, and you have to just be able to take the lows as well as the ride up. This project was one that at one point in 2019, we hit major national headlines when Kaiser Permanente, the big healthcare organization, decided to move their headquarters here. And it was going to be a major project. It, again, made national headlines. The project, unfortunately, did not survive 2 big impacts. One was the unexpected passing away of Kaiser's CEO, Bernard Tyson, African-American head of this major healthcare behemoth company. And he was a major champion of this project. And then COVID hit. And so the project for Kaiser is on hold right now. And we're basically repositioning the project in the market. But I mention it not only because of the fact that, you know, I want to be very forthcoming about the fact that, you know, we encounter challenges in this market, and it's not all about the great ups, but it's also about turning some of the down experiences into positives. We are excited about this project going forward. We're excited because of what it represented in terms of community engagement. And I want to say that we had a moment we took a retreat with Bernard Tyson, the president, when this project was first publicly announced that they would be moving their headquarters. And we spent the morning, and this goes to Carrie's question. We spent the morning of that retreat, the first 2 hours, debating over what was going to be our LEED certification objective for the project. And we spent 2 hours debating the impact on the budget, the impact on the look, the skin of the building, the impact on the schedule, the impact on many aspects, like, whether we were going to use external bracing or internal bracing, where we're going to use detached HVAC systems or not. And every single one of those critical decisions that we debated, we had to think about, can we do this and make our LEED objective? Bernard Tyson had a moment after a couple of hours where he sat back and deliberated, and he said, well, this whole project is about being bold. So we're going to be all the way bold, and we're going for platinum LEED certification. And from that point forward, I presided over numerous meetings with mechanical engineers, structural engineers, with a number of the design professionals, where we had to make all kinds of critical decisions about the core of the building, and about the security of the building, etc. And every single one of those critical decisions, we had to have that LEED scorecard right there, because every one of those decisions impacted whether we were going to get those 85 points. And by the way, of those 85 points, only 2 of them possible had to do with social equity. So while it was good to have it in there, it wasn't the big thing. It was all about the environment. It was all about sustainability. That's great. I will say that we made those decisions, and I'll go back to that meeting, that retreat with Bernard. After we decided about platinum on LEED, or Bernard decided, then he said, well, what about social equity? What kind of impact is this building going to have? We had another 2 hours of conversation. But what did not happen at the end of that conversation, there was not that moment where the Jeopardy music played, where he deliberated and then announced something very well defined in a LEED certification, platinum. We didn't have that kind of thing that we could turn to as it pertained to social equity. And it just drove home the point that, we have not yet really, even though we all are social equity inclined, oriented, or at least aware these days, we don't have that ability to be as defining and as efficient in being able to describe, and then basically inform and instruct going forward all of the different people in the value chain what that objective and what that result is going to be. So I'll give you one quick example of how that shows up. When we were going to then go to vertical construction, and we had to interview a number of design professionals for the actual work of doing the construction drawings. Well, we wanted to make sure that we had a diverse group of professionals and make those opportunities available, but we also had to make sure that we had candidates that had the professional capabilities. And we had an interview process where we would interview this revolving door of professionals. And structural engineering, for example, the guys that came in the door that were part of that conversation about the impact and the structural during our pre-planning process, that community of people that kind of fed that room where we were deliberating over it, they were much better prepared when the interviews came than somebody, say, from the community that was even a better experience, background, but just wasn't part of that information. They were able to then, the people that were part of that process early on were able to give better answers, and those answers didn't necessarily reflect their qualifications, their critical thinking capability, or anything else. So this is why, we realize that you have to be very intentional going into these projects. Then finally, what I want to say is that our Coliseum project, as we start with the East Line and the Mandela project, the Coliseum project is this massive development. It's going to be over 120 acres. It's going to go on, producing outcomes for decades to come. And so what we want to make sure is that we build into every aspect of the DNA of this project the ability to have equity as intentionally designed into the project as environmental sustainability, as seismic, structural integrity, as ADA compliance. So that is our big process. These are the projects that we're looking to pilot. We're partnered with firms like Gensler, Hensel Phelps Construction, Swinnerton Construction, a number of people that have a national presence beyond Oakland. And so we're hoping that through those connections, and we're expecting, not hoping, that through those connections that these best practices will be taken forward. These are some of the pictures of what the Coliseum project will eventually turn out to be. And then finally, you look at a place called Mission Bay. This is what it looked like 21 years ago. And then they started this development boom that was part of this expansion of biotech. This is what it looks like today. It hosts the new home of the Warriors. By the way, our Coliseum project is where the Warriors recently moved from. All of this development has taken place in a relatively short period of time. And this only goes to show how quickly, through real estate development, we can change the fortunes of a community if we're intentional about it. So our projects are building in technology. We have a fiber optic system that we're tapping into that runs throughout the BART system. We're going to be using that to bring the cutting edge new big data to the projects, supercomputing. I will say that I was honored to be a guest speaker or at the upcoming NVIDIA GTC. That's their big global technical assemblage that happens next week, in fact. And I will be able to provide a link to that for anybody that might be interested in talking about how we engage with big tech and incorporate technology by working with companies like Google, Intel, as well as NVIDIA, and tying in these different technology opportunities into this whole objective and initiative to bring about sustainability. We have gotten a global audience. This is something that the Vatican has recently bought into, and they're going to use their bully pulpit to make sure that these best practices that not only will help us in this country, these best practices that will not only bring about more community engagement here, that these best practices will be available to a global audience, because bringing about equity, inclusion, just like environmental sustainability, involves that same intentionality, whether you're in Oakland or you're in Kyiv, Ukraine, or in a city or a township in West Africa. And so with that, I will wrap it up and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alan. We actually do have a couple of questions on here already. I can read them off and you and I can provide some answers. So the first one that was submitted says from an anonymous attendee. Hi, Alan and Anna. What specific actions are needed to ensure someone receives the certification? Will there be a list under each pillar of specific criteria to achieve or satisfy all 6 of them? I'm going to go first and then let you take a stab at this, Alan. The short answer is very similar to LEED certification and some of the other rating systems. Yes, there will be an actual scorecard, and each of the pillars will have a designated number of potential points ranging from the low end, medium end to high end, depending on which certification level you're seeking. So very similar to what Alan anecdotally pointed out when they were working on a large scale project and they were looking for LEED certification, having that scorecard right there next to them as they make these decisions is going to be imperative. And so that is definitely one of the ways that we will be doing this. What those actual point allocations are yet, we do not have all of those details worked out just yet. A lot of this will come from our stakeholder engagement as we start to develop out LEEP version 1.0, but the short answer is yes, that is definitely there. Alan, did you want to speak to that question before I move to the next one?
Yeah, we do, just to amplify what Anna said, we do have the advantage of a late start.
Yeah.
And fortunately, there's a number of different models that we had out there, we still have out there, and we want to really embrace the best of them. But what I had in my experience with LEED was the template that I had to start with. And I just realized in doing my homework that not only was LEED a structure that we could use as a template, the way the initiative was organized and came together over the time frame was also a model that we could follow for better and for worse. We could actually avoid some of the frustration and some of the fits and starts. So we would look at taking the structure of LEED and applying those. I told one of the LEED founders that if I put the history of your program into a word processor and search and replace sustainability with social equity, I have the program designed and the whole process of how to get there. He quickly scolded me and told me that there were intellectual property issues that I had to be worried about, but I think he got over it and he's going to let us use it. But yeah, that's.
Thank you, Alan. The next question I am actually going to toss over to you, Alan. This one's from David, and he asks, LEEP's goal is to incentivize the economic potential of large and small scale developments to generate maximum levels of diversity and economic participation. Has there ever been a time where levels were not met? What can be some of the issues that can lead to this occurring?
Well, if you look at Oakland right now, it rarely are there acceptable levels of participation. We had a situation where over the last 5 years, there was just an unprecedented boom in construction, in the growth of the skyline. And we had literally several thousand housing units built, I think around 4,000 entitled and constructed. A lot of cranes up on our skyline. Unfortunately, if you looked at those cranes that were on the skyline, none of those cranes were presided over by anyone that looks like me. Well, thankfully, nobody that looks like me, but no one of color. At the end of the day, those cranes were presided over by not only people that did not represent the diversity of Oakland, But Oakland is a city that's over 50% people of color, well over 50% people of color. And when you have that kind of dynamic happening, you then have the people that are calling the shots about who's going to design it, who's going to build it, who's going to own it, who is going to be designed to come and live and work there, being called by people that do not represent the demographics of Oakland. So unfortunately, as the skyline has grown, the homeless camps have grown faster than the skyline. And you could draw a direct correlation between the inability of people to participate in that real estate class of asset to their inability to basically take care of their basic needs. Now, the shocking part of it is when you look at where was the capital, because mainly the biggest disqualifier in the industry has been lack of access to capital. And the capital that builds that skyline that allows you to do everything from you not only erect the skyscraper, but to acquire the property, to do all the community outreach. That capital is presided over by, again, a relatively small, non-diverse community of people. And unfortunately, that community of people doesn't even represent the populations. A lot of the capital, for example, comes from pension funds. And the pension funds are contributed, especially public pension funds, by people like my mom, a school teacher in Oakland, who all of her decades in the school, in the education business, all of her pension money was controlled and managed by people that didn't look like her and invested a lot outside of Oakland. So we need to make sure that we have more diversity in the process. That's what LEEP is meant to create. It starts with providing access to the resources needed to get it done, and then making sure that we build in these best practices that we talked about in order to achieve that. And then finally, in doing so, it's not only going to be a more just industry, but Oakland's economy, for example, will function much better when you have everybody able to be into the recycling of the dollars and involved in the economy of the built environment. That's going to create a healthier place for investments to be made. So one of the things that we want to do through LEEP and some of our associations to be able to measure that, to document it, and to basically have that data available to people to use as underwriting criteria and rationale in terms of how those funds are managed.
Thank you, Alan. The next question that we have is from another anonymous attendee. What actions/projects are you most excited about? Are there any that you're worried about and need more research or input about? I'm going to start off with a short answer and then hand the mic over to you, Alan. So my personal role is really to get this organization that's a small fledgling nonprofit off the ground. So I'm really excited about all of the work and organization and structure that goes into that process. Doing presentations and speaking to people such as yourselves at college campuses, at trade shows, at conferences, really getting the word out there about what we're doing and listening and hearing what the feedback is from the professional community as well as the community organizations on the ground. A lot of the feedback we have also received is from other developers of color, women developers, wanting to understand and figure out how can we actually create those standards of best practice and some of the pitfalls that they've individually and as a company have run into, and how we can develop something out from that that helps to really create more inclusive growth for everyone, both in the professional real estate industry with people of color, such as Alan, who are in the industry, and those who are not, such as community organizers. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know, right? And so In terms of research and making sure we have a really good understanding and foothold, we did some initial preliminary research before launching, but we also need to have ongoing research as well to really evaluate, one, figuring the metrics that we need to evaluate within the certification system itself, as well as a feedback loop of evaluating whether those metrics were the most appropriate ones. And as Alan's already stated, we do heavily believe in making sure we're using technology to implement and record and survey what's going well and what isn't going well and who has access to that data. So I'm going to pause there and Alan, let you take away the rest of that question.
Sure, and if the question was meant to talk about real estate projects, I think all of our projects are exciting right now, but I'm really particularly excited about the Coliseum, just because of the scale of the project and the potential for it to have so many decades of impact, and how we start this project and how we set it up and what foundation we put this whole enterprise on is going to be really, really a great way to really demonstrate, the potential benefits and the challenges as well of this equitable development initiative. And we do have developers of all colors, white men developers, Asian women developers, that we're so excited about their excitement about what we're doing, because many people really want to do the right thing. They just need to have a way to not only understand how to do it, but a way to be recognized for it. And they need to do it in a way that they understand how to do it cost efficiently and cost effectively. So our Coliseum project is, with its potential, 12 plus million square feet of development envelope as of right now, just provides such a huge opportunity across an array of development capabilities to deploy some of these things, measure the outcomes, and basically, bring these partnerships together. The project also involves, our intention to bring an NFL expansion team to Oakland. And we've been having some pretty encouraging conversations with the NFL. This is kind of an example of what being a real estate developer allows you to do. The meetings with technology companies and deploying like autonomous vehicle technology as part of our project, integrating in, the Internet of Things, those are just really fun things and things to be excited about. And then things to make sure that you're more equitable. I think we're going to be bridging the digital divide in many ways with some of these things that we're working on.
Absolutely. The next question comes from Maria. And this one I think will be happily answered by you, Alan. How has the development community received and responded to the initiative?
Yeah, I think, again, when we got to the point, much with Anna's help, when we got to a point where we were able to correlate what we're doing to LEED as an example, it became a lot more clear, what we were trying to achieve. And that is a rating system that gives you a rating, that there's a scorecard, there's best practices that are suggested, the ability for people to make voluntary choices about what they want to embrace or not embrace, and that ability for people to communicate what the objectives are. So those are, again, it's this advantage of a late start, but that's been something that's made it easier for people to understand and therefore grab onto and accept. And so we're looking forward. We have had one challenge with getting our 501c3 because of COVID. All of our nonprofits have been slowed down, but hopefully that ice is breaking. And we're going to have a community of people ready to jump on board. And so we're looking forward to this next year being one where a lot of the people that have been kind of anxiously ready to get involved will have different ways that they can come together and help not only support the program, but help define. Because I will say to those on this call, it really takes industry practitioners that understand everything from how to design a building to how to discount a cash flow, to understand land use and the laws associated with it, to really come up with best practices that can be integrated seamlessly into the inner working of the industry. And again, we have to do it with intentionality, as well as with skill and determination to be equitable. And so we're excited about the reception in that regard.
Absolutely, and I'll piggyback off of this and also say Alan's a little modest. He certainly was one of the primary people to really convey from the developer standpoint of people understand what LEED is. And as he's noted, having that advantage of a late start, like people know what this is, they can relate to it, they've seen it for years, they know how to work it. And so really framing ourselves after LEED and some of the other larger environmental sustainability frameworks is really helpful for us getting our foot in the door. And from my perspective, in terms of how the development community specifically sees us, thus far we've had a really positive reception, a lot of inquiries and curiosity about how this will work and when it'll work and at what scale it's going to work, and can we get involved in pilot projects, and how have you considered this technology here? Have you considered how you're going to do some of your initial advisory committee assignments and things of that nature. So we've gotten a lot of positive feedback thus far, and we understand that being as small as we are for the moment, we will hopefully be able to scale and get more feedback from a larger geographic area as well. We're heavily involved on the West Coast because you start with what you know, right? And so I'm in Seattle and Alan is in Oakland. We have connections and more pilot projects down the way in Pennsylvania, in the Midwest. We have a few out on the East Coast as well. And so we're really trying to broadly look at developers from all over the nation to start and say, hey, what does equitable development mean to you in your city or your area? What does this mean? How is it implemented? What are the hurdles you're going through? And really taking that data and that information and incorporating it into the standards of best practices. But so far, the reception has overwhelmingly been positive. And to the point of what Alan mentioned earlier, as developers are holding these meetings and really looking and seeing community engagement, not necessarily as an impediment to moving forward, but actually being able to move forward because they had community engagement buy-in from the get-go is really helpful. And I'm sure from a cost benefit analysis as well, making sure that, if the community is engaged early and continuously, you'll have lower litigation costs and other impediments from a financial perspective as well. So I just wanted to chime in on that. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
One other thing on that too is, in terms of, the evolution of a program, when we put these best practices in place, you want it to be able to evolve because, the economy changes and you have to change your tactics. Technology changes, the outcome of the projects, will help to change the circumstances. And one of the great things about LEED, you could say, is that it's kind of structured to evolve with time. I mean, they started their nonprofit in late 1991, and LEED 1.0, I think, came out in 1998. It was 6 or 7 year process to get that project, to get LEED 1.0. Now they're 4 point something. And, it just indicates that it has evolved. And we would expect that equity and the inclusion and social equity will be embraced. It will evolve. In 2005, when I would do a project, we were 50%. Projects were 50-50 in 2005 about whether they were going to go for a LEED certification or not. Nowadays, you don't build a project without some form of LEED certification. For a lot of tenants, you just would not be an option. And so we believe that over time, this will be embraced by the industry as important as environmental. We know it is. We know that if you don't make the investments now, society, everybody pays the cost no matter what color you are. Your future, your health and safety is at risk, and your economic well-being as well. And so that evolution is important. And so, yeah, that's one of the things. We will also say, hopefully, just like I pay a lot of fees to lead consultants now. There's a whole industry established around it, and it's worth it for the environment. But if you do it for a tree, why not do it for me? And at the end of the day, we want to have an industry built around achieving these goals so that we can develop the science and math and the skill set. And we hopefully can provide some great career opportunities for people. And so anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Alan. So I'm going to go back over to the Q&A side. We have, this one's a little lengthy, so I'll try to not read it too fast for you. Extremely interesting and inspiring discussion. What numeric or percentage goals or requirements have you established for social equity achievements? Please share the social equity accomplishments of your projects, such as how many local residents trained, how many hired, what percentage of total expenditures went to local or small or disadvantaged businesses, how much affordable or workforce housing created, what percentages of the total, etc. Also, did you choose to separate the affordable and market rate housing in different buildings? Why not mixed income housing seamlessly blended? Alan, I'll let you take a stab first and then I can comment.
Yeah, well, let me start with that last one. You saw on our Mandela Station project, we had the 2-door. And, again, I kind of feel that we have to sign up to be really test, dummies, if you will, for these different initiatives. We're building right on BART, and you have to build as much density when you're building on public transit. And unfortunately, the way the market is structured, we could have made 2 choices. We could have either built a mixed building, and in doing that, we would have had to build this tapestry of different financings that all had to happen in sync with each other. And as a result, we probably would have been able to build like projects that are built nearby, probably 8 to 10% affordable units. In our case at Mandela, and what that means, you might have gotten 60 or 70 units. We're building 240 units, and we are making 1/3 of those units available to extremely low income people. Now, the financing for a market rate project and the financing for affordable, those are dissimilar metals. And you have to basically, for affordable, put a whole tapestry of funding sources in place. On the other hand, with market rate, it's all about hitting the market. It's all about, timing. And so we just, after going through it, our ideal would be to integrate and have 1 door for everybody. But we had to make the choice whether we make the benefits of being on transit and a 1-seat trip to all of the major job markets in the Bay Area, including Silicon Valley, available to those affordable, patrons, the people that need the affordable housing, or whether we try to create a social mix of affordable and mixed income families. And we chose, in this particular case, to go with the unit count. We need as much affordability, and we also need the ability to afford. And so we work on both. And that's what our project reflects. But I'm glad that that question came up.
Did you want to talk about the first part of the question, any of the social equity accomplishment metrics that you already have from any of your current or prior projects?
Sure. So, so starting with that one, the matrix was providing as much affordability as we can to the people that are most at risk right now, vulnerable. We look at, when it comes down to our project, our policies are really meant to have a workforce that is reflective of the demographics of the city and restorative in that, right now, Oakland's Black community, for example, its population has severely declined. Unfortunately, a lot of people had just left because they found it unaffordable to live there anymore. A lot of people have simply been taken out by the subprime mortgage debacle and the foreclosure market. And so we, through our hands-on practices, look to achieve a workforce that reflects the community that we live in. And that way we're also working to enhance the economy that we live in. That's an ideal. We've achieved it in the past on projects. We've had projects where we failed miserably. We're trying to learn from those projects where we failed. And we're trying to also really continue those best practices to where we've made a lot of progress. So, but our objective clearly is in all aspects of the project, whether it's the design, the construction, the management, the workforce there, is to really press hard to have a participation that reflects the community.
Thank you, Alan.
Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's a really great comment, and would love if this person reaches out to us as well. I think, answering it in reverse order as well, we want to have enough flexibility, as Alan just demonstrated, to make sure that however we're addressing housing for all, that there's flexibility within the scorecard, that there's flexibility to be able, depending on the project, depending on the financing structure, depending on the local requirements, depending on what the community needs are, that there's flexibility in how the housing requirement is met. But no matter how it's met, we want to make sure we don't create another situation like the very infamous one of the Bay Area, where there's a lot of commercial or industry or infrastructure that's non-residential that didn't keep up with what the average worker is earning, that didn't keep up what low income folks are earning. And so you have a housing crisis that's then created, even though you have economic development and growth in certain sectors. And so making sure that there's flexibility in the scoring and creative options as well, so that everyone can have accessibility to affordable housing for whatever the income range may be. And then to answer the first part in terms of social equity accomplishments, I think you're asking the exact right questions, and this is a part of what we're trying to codify and put together, is figuring out, is there a certain tier or a certain number or a certain percentage that's necessary to meet local requirements or to meet our scorecard, or to meet the needs of that community. And that's where you're also going to start to see some of the flexibility and ranges of whether or not you have majority low income housing, or if you have mixed use housing, or whether you have training certifications or programs that are unique to that local community, or if you're going to have outside community colleges or universities come in and help do some of the training, et cetera. So while I don't have necessarily all of the exact numbers yet, that is a part of what we're developing into LEAP 1.0. So if you have some thoughts, questions, or suggestions for that, please do reach out to us. My email address is Anna, A-N-A, at leapbuild.org. Alan has the exact same email address, except his is Alan at leapbuild.org, or you can meet him at Alan at SUDA, SUDALLC.org. We have one more.
.com.
Oh, sorry, .com. Thank you very much.
SUDA
SUDALLC.com. Thank you, Alan, for that correction. And we do have one more question specific to you, Alan, that I think you can answer, and we'll make that the last question for this session. And that's, did you write into the agreement for the land a write down of price to accommodate affordable or workforce housing?
Yes. Typically, there is some accommodation given to that. So the answer is that has, when it's been public land, that's been the requirement. When it's private sector land and we're buying from private individuals, there's no such accommodation possible, because people are going to sell their land for whatever the market value is.
Thank you, Alan. And with that, I believe those are all the questions in the Q&A in the chat, and I will hand it over to Maria. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Anna and Alan. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us about this novel idea. And we really look forward to its implementation and to what the outcomes are once the initiative is implemented. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And we will check back with you in a few months to see how this all rolls out.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We're really honored to be here. Thank you so much.
You.
And best of luck to everybody in your careers going forward. We're here if we can be of assistance or support as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It was great to speak tonight. We would love to hear from you if you want to keep the discussion going. So please do reach out to myself or to Alan. Thank you again.
All right, thanks for all for joining us tonight. Good night.